Okay, so hey, I just wanted to, this is Heavy T here. I just want to shoot out another video regarding SRA. I know I wrote, or just basically did another one earlier, a couple days ago, and I just wanted to do another one and kind of follow up with some of your guys' comments. And excuse me here real quick. Anyway, I just wanted to, follow up with your guys' comments and just kind of go over some of the questions you guys had. I know some of the comments some of you guys had were regarding like, clues and things like that on whether you've been, if you've ever been Mk-Ultra or gone through some of the programs. And it's really difficult to say if you have or not because of the memory suppression. And there's a lot of that takes place in this program. And I kind of figured that out the hard way. But there are some clues that I kind of came into, like they came into fruition a little bit later on after I realized that I had been Mk-Ultra. And a couple of the clues, you just don't think of them, I guess, as you're growing up. They do seem a little odd, some of them, but you just don't, you just think you're a teenager and you're just going through weird stuff, you don't really take a really broad look at it until, something like this happens, until you wake up and like, this kind of a program just starts bleeding through everywhere and you're just like, you don't know basically who you are anymore for a little while. It's pretty devastating. And then you got the suicide program running because they partition that in there, and you hate yourself and you just want to die, and it's really hard stuff. And so I just want to go over some of the clues to help some of you guys with some of your comments that you guys had. And I guess the biggest clue that I remember was a lot of the music I listened to was really dark growing up. Like I remember, like, I used to listen to Metallica and Iron Maiden and like some of the, like, Megadeth, Slipknot. I mean, some of the hardest bands, like, metal bands I was into, but it wasn't like I listened to their music. It didn't like do things to me, get me pumped up, and it didn't like, I know it's really like hard for people to listen to some of that music because it's, it's dark and it's heavy, and most people don't really listen to heavy metal because it's not really enjoyable to listen to, especially that kind of heavy metal. And for me, it always was. I'm not sure why. It was always like kind of soothing to me. It always like kind of settled me down. I could think. It was kind of like that background kind of music when I would like do, some of my artwork and stuff or read a book. I'd always listen to that kind of music, and I'm not sure why. It was almost like listening to classical music for some people. It was like, that's what it was for me. It really soothed me down and calmed me down. So I'm not sure why. I got the second clue I would definitely throw in there would be, like occult symbols, and definitely a lot of things that have to do with the occult. I know occult means hidden knowledge, but there is a lot of Luciferian and satanic agendas that run into the occult, and I think that's how the occult gets, a lot of its bad name. I don't think necessarily all the occult stuff is satanic or Luciferian. I just believe that, there is a heavy influence in it, and a lot of that stuff does kind of draw people into the other stuff. So, but I've always been interested in like books, Stephen King books. They were always the darker, kind of more occult type of books, movies. I liked darker horror movies, science fiction horror movies, science fiction horror books. And I was always kind of drawn to that type of entertainment for some reason. I remember, like, some of my better movies, my most favorite movies were kind of dark movies, and for some reason for some reason, I'm not sure why, I just was drawn to those kind of movies. Some of the other things would be like some of the girls that I used to date. I used to like gothic girls for some reason for a long period of time, and I was kind of into the punk rock stage a little bit. I used to skateboard, and I was always kind of withdrawn from, like, the normal. I hung around a lot of like other kids from different schools versus like kids from my school, and I'm not sure what that had to do with it, but like all of my best friends were from different high schools. It wasn't like I had my best friends from my high school. I had one really good high school friend from my high school, but all of our friends were from different high schools. So I thought that was kind of weird growing up. And they were always like the toughest kids at the schools too. I would always make friends with like the biggest and the toughest people, like, that you could meet. Like immediately they would just be drawn to me, come over to me, hey, what's up, man, what's your name? And I'd be like, hey, yeah, and I wasn't like, it was just really weird. It was like those personality types just came right up to me, and we just got along so well, you know. I'm not sure exactly why. And then into like the drugs, there was just, when I was going into school, into college and stuff, there was just an overwhelming amount of like drugs. I just remember like people like almost literally fed them to me for a while, and they were all free. I never hardly ever had to pay for my drugs. They were always constantly being given to me and fed to me by like, some of my best friends were dealers, and we didn't really think about buying drugs. It was more like we saved our money for the clubs and the drinks and stuff like that, and the girls, and drugs was just something that we just always had, I guess, for a while there when I was going through like, you know, the end of high school into college and stuff. And you know, it's just something, I think drug abuse is one of the things that kind of goes along with this. I remember like 10 years of my life was just almost like a blur. It was just, you know, there was a lot of like just heavy drinking and after hours parties and clubs, and you know, we'd stay up drinking until 5 in the morning, you know, do it all over again, you know, the next day, you know. And it was like we did that for like 5-6 years, and then I remember my body just couldn't take it anymore. And I remember like all of a sudden it just kind of like was like, you just couldn't do it anymore. I started losing jobs and things weren't going real well, and that's kind of when things started kind of going downhill, and I started realizing that I had a problem with some of that stuff too. And so I definitely think, you know, there's definitely drug abuse involved. It's definitely a big sign. Some of the other things would be like, just trying to remember what else. There was a lot of the people, like I said, it was always like, I always met these weird people, but there was always like something dark about them, but they were always like asking for my advice. Like they were almost drawn to me. Like these people would be like, you know, such, you know, some of the badasses that you would think, and they would tell me their whole life story, you know what I mean? It was like within like an hour, I knew everything about them. It was just kind of crazy. Other things that I can remember is, oh, this music. I forget this music's on. Hang on a second here. But, yeah, so that was kind of crazy. And then, what else? It was just kind of like, I don't know, like I said, I was just kind of like drawn to like more darker sides of things, but I was always like a good person, you know. I always treated people with respect, and I was always really nice to people, and I always treated people like how I would want to be treated. And it was just like, I think that's one thing that's been really difficult for me, is I've always kind of walked, I guess, in the middle, like I've always tried to see both sides of things, and I've always kept an open mind, and that might have something to do with my targeting too, because they say like, you know, free-spirited thinkers and things like that definitely are some of the people that get targeted, and I think that I definitely fit into that line, you know. I fit into that characteristic line where I've always been like a free thinker. I've always not been like judgmental, and I've never been like believed in something so heavily. Like I would never go into like a cult or something. I could never join a cult because I just never could get that in depth into like a religion or something like that. I always kept up, you know, different views. You know, I always kept an eye out to see, you know, what was, you know, what kind of an agenda. There's always something behind it that was going on. You know, was it about money? Was it about something else? You know, power. You know, what's causing these people to do this, or come and talk to me about this? Or I was always kind of seeing through the curtains, you know, seeing through the blinds of everything. And you know, a lot of these people, I don't think they liked me because of that, because I could see through it. I was never like really naive to like different types of religions and gimmicks and sales gimmicks that people would throw at me. I always could see right through it. And I was a salesman for a long time. I was a regional sales manager for a long time. And that's what made me really good at sales too, is I was really good at reading people. So, but I'm not sure what that has to do with it. But anyway, those types of things, I was always like really into like, I always did like dangerous things. I didn't like have a lot of fear of like real dangerous things like roller coasters or, you know, anything like that. I was never scared of stuff to get, you know, go on rides or go skiing, or I always was like, I mean, if I could go skydiving, I would do it in a second. I've never been skydiving. I always wanted to go, but I would do it in a second. I wouldn't even think twice about it. You know what I mean? but yeah, so I never really had like a real fear of that kind of stuff. Not sure if that has anything to do with it or not, but physical pain, that's one thing I definitely notice. With physical pain, I've never, physical pain does not hurt me very much. Like, I can cut my finger literally really bad, I mean, and not even know that it's bleeding for like, and it'll be bleeding all over me, and you know, it'll be like 10-15 minutes later before I even notice, and I'll have blood literally all over me, and my finger will be gushing, and I don't even realize that it's happened. So I definitely have a really high pain tolerance for some reason, and obviously if they were torturing me, maybe that's one reason I do. But I've always noticed that my pain tolerance is extremely high. Psychologically, in certain areas, it is as well. But I'm pretty sensitive too in certain areas. So, and I think they know that. I think that's why they were, you know, approaching me more on a psychological level. Although this program is mainly psychological for the targeted individual, I think, you know, it definitely resonates with me, and they definitely know where they can hurt me, and so they definitely figured me out on that. But like physically, I mean, I've never been, I have a really high threshold for pain, so just I've never, I remember breaking my hand in high school and my bone was sticking out of my hand, and I wasn't crying or anything. I wouldn't like, didn't hurt hardly at all. I was like, hey coach, I need to go to the doctor, I think. He's like, oh shit, yeah you do. My bone's like sticking out of my hand, but it was just kind of like something that I never had a problem with, you know, with pain. So what else? It's kind of basically about all I can remember right now. If I think of more things, I'll let you guys know. But and like I said, it doesn't mean if you have these qualities or these things that have happened, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily, you know, you've been Mk-Ultra or, you know, you've been Satanic Ritual Abused. It just means that, you know, if you have a lot of these, it could play into that factor. It could play into the part that you might be, you know. And I definitely think nightmares too. I forgot to mention that. Nightmares, if you have a lot of like night terrors where it's like very evil, like type of, there's a lot of like symbolism and a lot of like satanic stuff in your dreams, in your nightmares and stuff, that could definitely, that, because I had a lot of those types of nightmares and stuff. I also remember mention, I don't know if I mentioned it on any of the recent videos I did, but I also used to have things that happened to me when I was younger where these beings would actually come into my room, and they would actually put me in like a sleep paralysis state. They would be like, you know, literally like, I think they were like 4 feet tall, and I remember one of them like had a hat on or something, but at one point, I don't know if all of them had hats or I just saw the one that did have the hat, but I never actually got a good look at them. They would always like raise me, they'd levitate me above my bed, and I'd be in like a sleep paralysis, and they would just suck energy out of me, and it would just be the most, you just feel this evil surrounding you, and it was just like overwhelming, and it was very frightening. I mean, it was scary as hell. I remember just shitting my pants a couple of times. Me and my brother, we used to go in and get my parents to, like, you know, we'd sleep with them or lay with them after it would happen, because my brother had the same thing happen to him. Me and him both were having it happen to us, and they wouldn't, my parents just got tired of us coming in there, and so we just decided, well, we'll kind of like, you watch one night for a few hours, and then, you know, you get some sleep and I'll watch for a few hours, and we just kind of took turns for a little while doing that for a little while, and it kind of worked for a little while, but, and it wasn't like every night we had them, so we never knew when it would happen, so that was what was really difficult. Maybe it'd be like once a month, once every 2 months, you know, it would happen, and when it did, it was just, it was overwhelming. I mean, it just, I can't describe it to somebody, you know, what it was, and it's like, that kind of like messed me up growing up, and I didn't get a lot of sleep a lot because of that stuff. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there, but other than that, if I like think of more stuff, I'll let you guys know, but that's pretty much all I can think of right now. And yeah, just kind of like pretty bizarre stuff, and you know, I did, like I said, I didn't really think much about that stuff until after all this stuff started happening, and I started thinking back on my life, like how long has this been going on, you know, and thinking about different things in my life that were weird. And there's definitely like those types of clues. I think if you add them all up, there's definitely got to be something to do with that. So anyway, Just want to throw that out there, you guys, and I hope you guys are having a good weekend. This is Heavy T, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. I'm out. Late.